May 2nd, 2002.
One second.
In Bethlehem, there is tension and danger.
Tend to have snipers up in the bell tower.
But the violence and death have a ritual all their own. In Ramallah, dawn brings the first real look at the destruction.
What's the meaning of breaking the doors, breaking the cupboards, breaking the computers?
And it was fairly systematic. They came in with these armored bulldozers and destroyed the vehicles one by one.
This is a war fought on many fronts.
I hope they will see it in the TV, in their own country.
Tonight, images of war, war of images.
From ABC News, this is Nightline. Reporting from Bethlehem, Ted Koppel.
There are at least two wars being waged here, and the military one may be the less important of the two. This is primarily a war of images and perceptions. The participants themselves are glued to their television sets, acutely aware of how everything is playing, not just in the living rooms of America, but in the foreign ministries of Europe and on the Arab street. The soldiers fight the first battles, and then the public affairs specialists and the intelligence officers put their spin on what has happened and how they feel the media should report it. Last night, the world was horrified to hear and see reports of heavy fighting once again near the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. Particularly disturbing, live television images of a fire raging on the upper floor of one of the buildings in the church compound. Yasser Arafat, newly liberated by the withdrawal of Israeli troops surrounding his compound in Ramallah, was among those watching the television reports. I spoke with him moments after he had talked to one of the Palestinian fighters still trapped by other Israeli troops inside the Bethlehem compound. He was reduced to a trembling rage.
I'm very furious of what is happening in the Nativity Church. It never happened in the whole history.
The event, as the Palestinians quickly realized, had the makings of a genuine and serious public relations disaster for the Israeli government. Arafat, not surprisingly, was unprepared to accept even the possibility that the fire had been started by the Palestinians themselves.
So you are believing these big lies? Can anyone burn himself? His house? The place where we're sleeping? The churches where he is praying?
So this afternoon we returned to Bethlehem and talked with Colonel Ronnie Numa, the commander of the Israeli paratroop battalion, laying siege to the church compound.
We didn't shoot anything that can light the church. We are not stupid. We know exactly what we're doing here. We know this is the most sensitive place for the Christian.
It had been Colonel Numa early this week who had taken us to one of his battalion's sniper positions. Colonel Numa, who had shown us that next to each sniper is a video cameraman recording precisely what the marksman at his side is shooting. As we were also shown, what happens at the site of the siege is videotaped from the underside of a blimp that flies overhead, from a camera attached to the top of a tall crane. All of this is monitored from at least two locations where other soldiers sit in front of television screens showing images fed from those overhead cameras. The Israelis certainly don't share everything recorded by all of their cameras, but they can and do when they need to, as now.
The piece of the glasses.
Amir Ofek, a press official with the Israeli Foreign Ministry, was conveniently available in Bethlehem this afternoon. What he shows us, he contends, demonstrates that the fire was started by those inside the burned room. The windows, he points out, were broken from the inside out.
not from something fired from the outside in.
If at all something from outside causes a fire, so definitely we should find the piece of the windows, the glasses inside the room.
An Israeli army intelligence officer, a colonel, whose face cannot be shown, was on site when the shooting began last night.
No, I think they will stop the Israeli from getting inside, because it was immediately covered worldwide, and immediately the pressure came, and I think this is their weapon to stop any Israeli attempt to get inside. But I know for sure that yesterday wasn't such an attempt.
You mean to get inside?
To get inside.
You know for sure because?
I know it for sure because any plan to get inside, I'll know about it.
This afternoon, Nightline producer James Blue contacted Anton Salman, one of the Palestinian negotiators inside the compound, on his cell phone. Why, asked Blue, can't the Palestinians who want to just come out?
If you are in their position, do you be glad to surrender yourself? If you are in there, you are glad to surrender yourself? This is the answer for your question.
And then there was this exchange with that Israeli intelligence officer.
This note, please stop.
Yes, for Mr. Reznik, we know that he's the Father Reznik. Yes.
You know him?
Of course we know him. He's one of the 3 Armenian priests. He's desperate and he wants to win out. He's under severe pressures from the Palestinian and from the situation. And in the other hand, you have to stay here. This is the order of his chapel.
Those whom the Israelis would not arrest may not be able to leave because the militant gunmen inside, the terrorists, won't let them. As for the terrorists, they can't get out because the Israelis will imprison or exile them. But the Israelis are also trapped. Militarily, as Colonel Numa explained, they could take the compound with ease.
You told me a few days ago, Colonel, that you could very easily, I mean, from a military point of view, you could very easily get inside the compound.
Half an hour, I told you. Less than half an hour.
Less than half an hour, exactly.
But in doing so, they might destroy one of Christianity's holiest sites, which, for reasons of world opinion, they simply cannot do. And that, in the final analysis, is probably also the strongest reason for believing that they did not set the fire to the church last night. The Israelis still feel that they can win this confrontation by waiting. The Palestinian gunmen inside may not. When we come back, dealing with the dead and wounded as a matter of course.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by the U.S. Postal Service.
In normal times, Manger Square is bustling with pilgrims about to visit or just emerging from the Church of the Nativity. The souvenir shops edging the square help sustain the economic welfare of this ancient town of Bethlehem. These, though, are not normal times. For the moment, only a squat olive-drab Israeli tank or two hint at what is going on here. A couple of hundred armed Palestinians are trapped inside the church compound, and when one or more of them ventures even for a moment into an open courtyard, overhead Israeli cameras pick them up and hidden Israeli snipers pick them off. It happened again just before we arrived there this afternoon. The battalion's commanding officer, Colonel Ronnie Namu, explained.
I mean, you have sniper up there?
We have sniper, not men sniper, but sniper.
Oh, I understand.
Okay.
A remote-controlled .50 caliber rifle along with a TV camera are attached to the end of that crane, and this afternoon the combination demonstrated its effectiveness once again. Israeli paratroopers lead the way as we move out behind the cover of an armored jeep. The soldiers fan out across the square, watchful for Palestinian snipers, anticipating a delivery. First, there is the waiting.
They tend to have snipers up in the bell tower. It's become part of an all too familiar pattern. As you see behind me, one of the Franciscan monks and one of the Palestinian negotiators bringing out the latest casualties. There was fighting just a couple of hours ago, 1 dead, 1 wounded. They're bringing them out right now.
In fact, as it turned out, Israeli snipers had wounded 2 men and killed a 3rd. The handover of casualties has developed into a routine. Not casual, certainly, but commonplace. At the direction of the paratroopers, the stretchers are carried to a place close to the wall, not visible to Palestinian snipers. The casualties are inspected by an Israeli medic and an intelligence officer. The wounded are transferred first. And as they are carried to waiting ambulances, as their faces become visible, they are transformed from statistical footnotes, so and so many Palestinians were killed or wounded in Bethlehem today, into actual men in the grip of a real and excruciating pain. It is not altogether clear that they will survive their wounds. The cost of the siege at Bethlehem has a face now. 3 faces today.
Please, no close-ups. No. Okay, I'm going to break the camera.
Enough. Can you tell me the circumstances of how this man died?
We know for sure that he opened fire against our troops and then died from a sniper bullet.
You say you know that this man is one of the armed men, one of the men who fired on your troops.
Yes.
How do you know that?
We know that from sure from a picture from a balloon. He opened fire, then he got shot from an Israeli sniper.
And that just happened a couple of hours ago? Or?
Yeah, I think 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that he's one from the wanted people inside, from the list.
Right.
But I'm sure that he was armed and he was open fire, and we have all pictures on a camera from the balloon.
The Israelis have driven off the 2 wounded men some time ago, but the dead Palestinian lies on a stretcher in Manger Square. An Israeli intelligence officer, whose face we can't show you, waits with the body.
Why are you waiting now with the body of the dead man here?
The purpose of waiting is in some aspect paying respect for this person. The purpose is waiting for the Palestinian ambulance to come here and take him. When the monks and priests that waiting outside can verify that he will go to the Palestinian and with the proper attitude. And that's why we're waiting here with the dead person.
So they know he's going to a Palestine. He'll get the proper burial.
Of course, and immediately, with no any hesitation and no Israeli hands that will deal with this process.
I understand.
There is no irony in the Israeli officer's voice or demeanor. They will kill each other, these men, without hesitation. But then, when the killing is over, there are certain things that must be done in a certain way. When it is all done, the Israelis and Palestinians linger for a while. They have come to know each other well these past few weeks, and a sense of genuine respect seems to flow among them. But after a few minutes, the besieged and the besiegers go their separate ways until their next inevitable meeting. When we come back, Nightline correspondent Chris Bury reports on sifting through the rubble after the siege of Ramallah was ended. Last night, the Israeli tanks pulled out of the West Bank town of Ramallah, ending the siege of Yasser Arafat's compound. This morning, the town awoke, and for the first time, the residents could see the extent of the destruction. Here's Nightline correspondent Chris Bury.
On the day after the Israeli tanks rumbled out of Ramallah, things only appeared to be getting back to normal. Yasser Arafat was finally able to leave his compound freely for the first time since late March. The city finally began to clean up from a month-long military occupation. And a math professor was finally able to pick up his young son from school without dodging Israeli tanks along the way. But for many in Ramallah, the day after meant taking the full measure of the destruction. Not just damage to the walls of Arafat's compound, where Israeli tanks had punched holes and blocked entryways during the initial incursion, but damage to nearly everything at the Palestinian Authority headquarters. The same organization that Israel accuses of sponsoring terrorism also provides basic government services to 2 million people. These cars belong to Arafat aides and government workers. Witnesses say the Israeli army crushed them into makeshift barriers around the compound.
That took place mostly over the last week or so, and it was fairly systematic. They came in with these armored bulldozers and destroyed the vehicles one by one, picked them up.
Kevin Skavorak, who sneaked into the compound with a group of peace activists 11 days ago, videotaped Israeli soldiers crushing cars and smashing vehicles parked just outside the Palestinian Authority headquarters.
That was about 4 or 5 days ago. They tried to break into it with a sledgehammer at first and failed. They'd been breaking into other vehicles with the sledgehammer. The armored vehicles they were having some difficulty with, and then they brought in bulldozers and tried to crush them and finally opened them up after some effort.
The headquarters of the Palestinian Authority was a harbor of terrorists, as you know, and their cars are suspect and oftentimes booby-trapped.
Captain Jacob Dalal is a spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces.
If the car is suspect of being booby-trapped, it has to be neutralized in a way that would cause least damage to person. And if that indeed was the case in the case of the specific car that you're talking about, and if they had to neutralize it by breaking the windows, then that's one thing. If this was wanton damage, that's another thing.
This is the central post office of the Palestinian Authority, serving the entire West Bank. The Israeli government insists its military mission here was to root out the infrastructure of terrorism. But Palestinian Authority officials say Israeli soldiers deliberately ransacked and looted these offices during the siege.
It is a civil ministry. It have nothing to do with the army. It is only over here letters and parcels.
The post office manager arrived this morning to find bags of mail, letters and packages ripped open, their contents scattered all over the floor. The post office safe knocked over and ripped apart. Officials here say it was filled with stamps and cash.
They have destroyed everything. Records have been destroyed, the letters, goods which belong to people we don't know.
Why do you think they went through all the mail?
Maybe kind of revenge. Maybe it's kind of revenge.
Soldiers also tore up nearly everything in the Interior Ministry, including this passport office, according to Palestinian officials who entered this building today for the first time since the siege began.
All of these offices were empty. What's the meaning of breaking the doors, breaking the cupboards, breaking the computers and damage it? And what's the meaning of using the rifles if there is nobody here? It means one thing. They want to cancel everything between us. They want to cancel the ministries.
This is a kind of message. Like we can remove the Palestinian Authority anytime we want. We can be back anytime we want. It is power. What they're showing is power against civilian people.
The goal of our operation was not to undermine or to disrupt the Palestinian civilian infrastructure. The goal of our operation, on the other hand, was to disrupt, dismantle, and destroy the Palestinian terror infrastructure.
Are you saying the post office was part of the terror infrastructure?
What happened here is that the terror infrastructure sank very deep into the civilian infrastructure.
In Ramallah, civilian life came alive again today. The streets were full, the markets bustled, and this city of 40,000 seemed to resume its everyday routines. But such appearances are misleading.
The dominant feeling is a feeling of frustration, pain, bitterness, and a little bit of anger. Not a little bit, much anger.
Marwan Awartami, the math professor who took his son home from school today, says the siege continues to take a toll on his entire family, even though it officially ended last night.
They can rehabilitate and reconstruct physical infrastructure, but I don't see how they're going to reconstruct dreams and feelings and how they're going to bring back lives that have been lost.
And the parents in this family already see the impact on their children, especially their 7-year-old son.
I look at what he's drawing. Tanks, guns, soldiers. He has to draw birds, cats, what he likes, what he loves. But, so I think that it needs so much time to, at least, get over these things.
The bitterness deep-rooted in the psychology of my children will live on for a long time to come.
The siege of Ramallah has obviously left deep scars on this place and its people, and though it appears Ramallah is returning to normal, few people outside Arafat's most diehard supporters seem to be celebrating. And the wounds here won't necessarily begin to heal just because the Israeli tanks have now left town. This is Chris Bury for Nightline in Ramallah.
I'll be back with a note about tomorrow night's Nightline town meeting. This is the Notre Dame Center on the Green Line that divides East and West Jerusalem. Tomorrow night, we'll be here for a special 90-minute Nightline town meeting. We're bringing together a panel that includes Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres and Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat, in front of an audience made up of both Israelis and Palestinians. Simply bringing them together in the same room will be an accomplishment in itself in these times. This will be the fourth Nightline town meeting in the Holy Land, and we hope you'll join us. That's tomorrow night on Nightline. And that's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Jerusalem. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.